What do you think of that, boys?
We'll be knights, just like that.
I'm Carolyne Larrington. I'm an emeritus professor of medieval English literature at the University of Oxford. I have written 2 books on Game of Thrones. Today we're going to look at scenes from the world of Game of Thrones in the context of medievalism and its meaning throughout the series. This is the expert take.
Think what is at stake.
I know well what is at stake.
I think this is a really interesting scene in terms of the revelation that Jaceres knows that he's not been fathered by Laenor Velaryon. So he's only got 50% Targaryen blood. And he can ride a dragon like his brothers can too. So 50% is kind of enough. But we have to remember that the dragons also choose their riders. Just because you're a Targaryen doesn't mean you can march up to a dragon and lay claim to it. The dragon has got to assent to it. And the problem that Rhaenyra has at this point is she has too many dragons, which is good, obviously, but not enough dragon riders, which is less good. And so the idea that she's going to bring in all of these people who claim some percentage of Targaryen blood, lower class people who are among the small folk of King's Landing, and test them out to see if they've got what it takes to ride a dragon, is a kind of desperate measure. You can see why Jaceres is unhappy about it, because he really feels, knowing that he's not the legitimate son that he and his brothers claim to be. He really feels that this is putting his status in jeopardy. Who am I? He says, I have a dragon, but what happens when you die? I don't have that telltale Targaryen hair. Will people accept me just because I've got a dragon, when we're going to have very soon at least 3 or 4 other people who are low-born, who have less claim to the throne than I do, who can also fly dragons? Is this not going to actually spread out the effects of the civil war, the Dance of the Dragons? And so you can see his very real unhappiness about this. And you can see here too, I think, this very strong medievalist notion of the way that nobility and blood are absolutely interlinked, and that your genetic inheritance, if you like, which is something, of course, that comes through in Game of Thrones as well, is what entitles you to your status in life. It entitles you to the Iron Throne or not, as the case may be. What we're going to see, of course, in the following episodes in this season is the problems that this whole new policy brings when the dragons just toast vast swathes of would-be dragon riders, the dragon seeds as they're called. But we do end up with 2 new dragon riders from the riffraff of King's Landing, plus Adam of Hull, who is the illegitimate son of Corlys Velaryon, and who therefore is kind of like a different version of Jaceres here. He's also illegitimate. He also doesn't have the signature Targaryen hair, but it looks like he's going to make a go of it as a new ally with Rhaenyra, which is what she needs at this point. So there's something interesting going on here, both on the kind of psychological level with Jace, but also with this whole kind of central premise of life in Westeros, that blood is what really entitles you to your position of privilege, membership of a house. And of course, in Game of Thrones at the beginning, the dragons have all gone anyway. And in Night of the Seven Kingdoms, dragons are a thing of the past. They died out when they were the size of dogs, and they're still a symbol of the Targaryens, but nobody really thinks there are going to be dragons again. But of course, by the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones, those eggs have hatched out, and the era of the dragons is coming back again.
The Lannisters send their regards.
It's the most powerful scene, I think, in certainly maybe the first 5 seasons, the ones that depend on the book so closely. And I think it has to do partly with the shock value and that gradually encroaching sense that something is wrong when the music dies away. And then you can see how Catelyn Stark thinks the minute they start playing the Rains of Castamere, why are they playing this Lannister-associated song in this wedding, which is supposed to be celebrating a union of Tullys and Freys? You also get that sense of, even if you don't know exactly what's going on in that scene in the courtyard, men wandering around with fiery brands is always a signifier that something is about to happen, there's action. And even if everybody else in the feast hasn't caught on to it like Catelyn has, Grey Wind, they're locked away in the stables. Robb Direwolf, he knows that something terrible is coming. The thing that even us as a modern audience really still deeply understand is just how shocking in terms of ethics within our own culture, but within the cultures of Westeros, let's say, as well, is the idea that you invite people to a feast and then you kill them just when they're disarmed, just when this idea of hospitality and its sacredness, the idea of guest right, which is invoked quite a lot in the books and in the show as well. The idea that you can deceive people in this way and kill them under your own roof when you're sharing food is what really packs the kind of emotional punch here in the setup for the Red Wedding. So it does follow the book pretty closely, though, of course, in the book, we have a different bride that Robb Stark has married, and that's a sign of a noble family that he's fallen in love with. It's not this woman from Essos, Talisa, who's the one that we have in the show. But the principles are still the same, that he promised to marry a Frey bride when he was given passage across the river at the Twins previously, and he's gone back on his word. And that's something that Walder is going to bring up again when Catelyn is begging for Robb's life and says that she swears they won't take vengeance. And he says, well, you and your son swore to me once before, and you broke that oath. And even though I think breaking that oath, which was kind of strategically necessary in order to get passage across the river, is a heinous thing to do, is not as bad as slaughtering all of your guests at a wedding there. So I think it's got very strong book material support. And I think that may be why it's such a brilliantly stageable scene, in the sense that you've got lots of material there from Martin to work with. The question all the way through these final seasons of Game of Thrones is, along with who's going to end up on the Iron Throne, is who is going to kill the Night King. The obvious person is Jon Snow. He's the hero. He's the lost heir to the Targaryen dynasty. And we already know this at this point. He even died and was resurrected by the Red God. He looks like he's the prince who was promised, this subject to this prophecy that's been echoing through Targaryen history ever since the time of the conquest. It should kind of be Jon Snow. So why isn't it? And it seems to be partly because he's busy holding off Viserion the Ice Dragon and making a kind of space for somebody else to get there. And you can see that the face-off has come between Bran, who's been acting as kind of bait, saying, it's me he wants, as the Three-Eyed Raven. We've been fighting this battle, the Three-Eyed Raven versus the Night King, over centuries. He's coming for me. I'll sit in the Godswood and wait for him. And the tension is kind of about, can Jon Snow get out of the fortress, get out of Winterfell, get over to the Godswood and kill the Night King before the Night King kills Bran? But then you see Arya coming from nowhere with, crucially, that Valyrian dagger that has been such an important symbol all the way through the series. Not flagged up all that much. We forget about it for long stretches. But there it is. And it looks like she's failed, but then it drops down and she gets the Night King with that Valyrian steel blade, the only thing that can actually kill him. And then we find ourselves going, what, Arya? So why? Why is Arya the person who the showrunners, who knows what Martin thinks, but the showrunners picked for this job? And it does kind of make sense, both with the storyline, with Arya having been recruited by the Faceless Men, having gone off and had this long training over there in Braavos, having gone through so much. Why her? And here I think what the showrunners are doing is thinking back to Tolkien and thinking back to that crucial moment in the battle of the Pelennor Fields, when the king of the Barrow-wights, this undead creature, very much in some ways like the Night King, says, "No man can kill me." And then Éowyn flings off her helmet and says, "I am no man." And so it's that unexpectedness of the wrong gender, as it were, being the killer. And Éowyn is a highly trained warrior. So too is Arya. What you kind of had there was the story of a messiah in Jon Snow, someone who's died and has been reborn, someone who seems to have all the prophecies about him, but they went with the other alternative storyline. And I think it does make sense of why Arya went off to Braavos for this training. But I can certainly see why some fans were pretty surprised by it.
Get up, Duncan! Get up!
What's really interesting, I think, about the Hedge Knight is the way that this trial by combat scene is the climax of the whole book. It's all leading up to it. And then we have aftermath after that. And it's very much based on the detail that Martin gives in The Hedge Knight. So it's really very close to the book indeed. And I think that helps with all the intricacies of plotting. The idea of a trial by combat involving 7 on each side is something that's only happened once before, it seems, in the history of Westeros. And that was way back 100 years previously to this. And it's a bit of a kind of sneaky thing for Aerion Targaryen to do. He's agreed to trial by combat against the Hedge Knight to try and resolve this question of who's telling the truth. Did Dunk really attack Aerion for no reason? Is he guilty of attacking a Targaryen prince, in which case he should lose his hand? And associated with that, Daeron has already accused Dunk of having kidnapped his squire Egg. So there are 2 charges at stake here. And the whole thing is dressed up with a kind of sense that this is a way to find out the truth of the allegations that are being made. The gods of the faith of the 7, the new gods, are invoked at the beginning, and they should intervene on the side of the ones who are telling the truth to give them victory. This was, of course, an actual medieval practice. It was only 1-on-1, though, not 7-on-7, which really would introduce a very random element into trying to find out what's true. And it was abandoned in the mid-15th century, kind of for obvious reasons. And in France, it was already abandoned in the 14th century. And the idea very much depended on knights taking up arms to defend the truth and believing the truth. And they would spend the night in prayer the night before to make sure God was paying attention and was definitely going to give victory to the right side. But here we've got quite a lot of surprise around the fact that Aerion even invokes this really archaic custom in order to get himself out of having to face Dunk 1-on-1, clearly, because Dunk is a big lad and a superior fighter. And it kind of rebounds on him in some ways. But although Dunk comes out of it as the victor, there's the death of Baelor Targaryen. There's kind of collateral damage in this. And he was Baelor the Good. And this is going to change the order of succession through the Targaryen dynasty and have repercussions later on.
I have entrusted you with a power only few have known, and I charge you to take it up with fealty.